Hello, everyone. My name is Casey from Casey's Book, and this is Katie Reed from Katie Reed. So, does your name still say author in it or no? But either way, we're here reading or talking about our reading, I should say, of East of Eden by John Steinbeck.
Uh,
Yay! So I have a lot to say about this book. Obviously, I think it was officially my fourth reread. But what were your initial thoughts as your first time going into the book? And we can do a few minutes without spoilers before we go like all the way into spoilers. So
okay. Yeah, so something I was hoping would like lessen some and didn't was Steinbeck's general like opinions on race and women, but acknowledging that and then just addressing the story. It was good. The ending was almost anticlimactic for me. Like it was impactful, but it felt kind of rushed at the end for me a little bit. I did enjoy watching the different generations come around. I thought that was a fun way to follow characters through things. And yeah, I mean, that was like my favorite characters are Lee and Samuel, hands down.
absolutely, they are fantastic. I agree that I enjoy the kind of telling through the multiple generations and all of that. And I think to an extent, I agree with the mildly anticlimactic ending. I think it just like, I read the last 200 pages yesterday for context, so I like felt all of it aggressively. But I guess if you're reading it at a more normal pace, then it does seem a little thrown together at the end. But I think it's because like at this point the story has been told, and we're kind of wrapping it up and leaving it with the last generation that's talked about in this book. I do think it's kind of funny that John Steinbeck is a character in this book very briefly, because his family, or he based the Hamiltons off of his family, and so
Oh,
all
really?
this
Okay.
kid John is supposed to be him, which is why he'll like use the I occasionally. I don't know if that's like their actual last names or anything, but that's what they're based off of. So I thought that was like a fun little touch. But
He gave himself a cameo, pulled a Stephen King.
woohoo, yeah, exactly. But I think this book is like the first 100 or so pages are a little slower, but then when everybody kind of gets to California, things are just really good. And Lee is absolutely the best character. I Jenny is there was no reason to use the N-word for her. Like, she doesn't have any parts. It doesn't add to the story at all to kind of just, I'm like, she was there and mentioned and then like she died. So I was like, was that really necessary?
Yeah.
I think the other thing you had told me that you were like, oh, I don't love this, when it was like, I was trying to find it so I could talk about it specifically, but it was the like Native American thing with like savagery and all of that, like very, very not nice ways to talk about the Native American people. I think that was more intentionally done because it compares like Adam to it throughout the story. But I agree that it could have like just not actually been there. But yeah, I think you can enjoy something with a critical sense. Be like, that wasn't really necessary, but I get it, but like I don't love it. So
Right. Yeah. Well, and I was telling a few people like it's a shame that John Steinbeck is so problematic because he could put together a story. Like that was it was well constructed. The characters were for the most part fleshed out. I Well, I won't say that yet because that's getting a little bit more into spoilers, I think. But I was a little confused as to why we kept getting the updates about the wars. Like, I understood that it was supposed to kind of set us in the time period that we are supposed to be in, with Adam. He was fighting Native Americans. And so that's the setting. So, I understood that, but then it wasn't until later on that I understood why that was such a necessary
Mhm.
storytelling device. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how much there is exactly to say about, or say more without spoilers, but just a brief thing if people want like what this book is about before we like go full spoilers. It's basically supposed to, it follows multiple families through multiple generations, and it's supposed to be a like retelling of the fall from the grace of God, story of Cain and Abel, Garden of Eden, which is why it's east of Eden. It's after they have all left. So there's a lot of like biblical analogies in here, and it definitely does get into like a different era and time. So there's different things, and and there's wars that happen to add context and other things. So do you have any other summary notes?
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and just look for some years because it does cover, like, does it cover a full century? I think it doesn't seem like it should, considering how many generations. Um,
I think it gets close to it. I don't know if it does a full generation, but it's like the late 1800s through World War One, basically.
Time frame of East of Eden by John Steinbeck.
You're asking Siri.
I'm asking Google. I don't like Siri. She talks back. The novel's action spans from 1862 through the outbreak of World War One, from World War One between 1914 and 1980. So, yeah,
But like,
1862 was when we were still badgering the natives, I guess.
yeah. Yeah.
So it's because it's essentially the Trask family and the Hamiltons, right? Are the two main families that you follow, and then you follow them through 3 generations across that time. 3, 4.
3 generations in the Trask family. I think it's 2. Well, it is we get mentions of the kids of Samuel and Liza Hamilton, so it is 3. But there's not quite as much storytelling with the kids of the kids in the Hamilton family. It's mostly the 2 generations there, but
right. And then like the insinuation is that one of the Hamilton children is the narrator, because he's supposed to be Ollie's kid, who Ollie's like the only we're doing spoilers now, right? So it's like,
oh yeah. Well, do you have a rating for the book before we do full spoilers?
Do I have a rating? I've not put it through Callpile yet. But if I had to do it off the top of my head, I'd give it a lower 4-star, probably. Okay. Maybe a higher 3-star. I'm not sure how it would come out. And a big part of that is because you spend so much of the first part of the story almost disconnected from where it's actually going, and it was frustrating to me right at the beginning. It's like, where is this going? Why are we talking about so many people? And how does this even all intersect? And then like 200 pages in, it's like, okay, here's where everybody intersects. And I'm like, okay, finally. Finally. Yeah, I get where we might be going here.
I think on my, I guess, 4-3 read, it's still like an initial 5-star for me, but I think this read I think it might have been like where it was at in life, but it's like a higher 4-star versus like a full-on 5-star right now. But it's still like my favorite book, even if it's not as high of a rating as it used to be. But
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Spoilers. We are doing spoilers. If you would like to read this book, I would recommend you don't watch the spoilers because you need to experience it. But thank you for making it this far in the video. So
right, yeah, there's not really a way to discuss the story in depth without getting into spoilers, and that's true for a lot of stories, but I feel like very specifically for East of Eden, because you start telling one part of someone's life within the story, and then you have to like jump back and cover 3 or 4 other people. There's not a way to do it without exposing some of the plot.
So you had mentioned a few things. You were like, oh, I don't want to say that yet because of spoilers. Do you want to say them now, or do we want to kind of it's hard to go character by character for this one. So
Yeah, so it was two things. Let me see if I can remember both of them. One of them was that I didn't understand why we were so focused on the wars outside of it placing us in a certain time frame until Aaron enlisted. And we got to see Adam's story kind of like come full circle with his start in the military and how he got in the military, and watching that all come around was like, oh my God, it's a fucking train wreck. It's like,
oh,
there was just nothing to be done.
mhm.
Yeah, so that was one thing. And then the other one, oh, Ollie is like one of the only Hamilton kids that actually makes it through the entire story.
Yeah, her and
One of three.
Will, and I don't know the other one, but there's one that doesn't have very much said about him at all, and like he also
Yeah.
survives. But yeah, Olive makes it, and she like has a happy life, so that's good for her.
Right, and that's like where the narrator is coming from. He's like, I live with the one who didn't have to go through all this shit, so I'm going to tell you about all this stuff that the rest of the family went through. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's like a pretty slow build, and we get a lot of backstory into Adam and his brother, who I cannot remember the name of. Charles. I opened it. And
God.
They first of all did not have a healthy sibling relationship. Also, their dad was a character, I guess. But yeah,
their dad was something else.
yeah, it like honestly, I noticed a lot more on this particular reread because I'm older and all that stuff. But it hurt me more this time when I was like seeing Aaron and Cal, which are Adam's sons, like kind of repeat the same like anger and like hatred and jealousy of each other, and that we saw with Charles and Adam. So I'm just like,
Yeah,
like, don't
and then
do
add to
that,
that
y'all.
the fact that they're like fraternal twins, because one of them is Adam's and one of them is Charles's, and like that's the implication throughout the whole thing. They're like, oh, it's two different placentas, it's two different things. It's like, oh well, that's because Catherine is a psycho.
She is insane. I think
And
she's
I
a
was
really
like, I was so I was almost disappointed with where her story ended, because it was like, you deserved far worse
than just
what you
like
got.
killing yourself.
Yeah, and then getting that other guy killed, who I'm not saying he deserved a happy ending or anything, but like the dude that was helping her out, and what was his name?
Joe.
Joe. Okay, yeah, Joe. It was like, I didn't feel sorry for Joe. I didn't necessarily want Joe to have a happy ending, but he gets fucking shot in the back, and it's like her fault. And it's like, God,
So
why
so
did you
Kathy.
have to do this way?
So to talk about Kathy more while we're here on the Trainwreck
Yeah.
Express,
Yes.
I liked how they or how she was kind of introduced as like she was missing something in her, and I think that she's just a very good but yeah, I believe there are some monsters born in the world of human parents. That was the beginning of Kathy. And my little notes here say, Kathy, you psychopath. No, but I think she was like just a very interesting villain, because in terms of, she's obviously like written as less than humans, and based on the choices and things she makes and like how calculating she is. And I don't necessarily know if that's like because she was a woman or whatever, but I think that she had a lot of power, and that was kind of cool to see. And then she was absolutely insane, and I don't want her to like have a good life, and she was just problematic all across the board. But I'm also like,
she
you knew
was
what you
almost the
wanted, though.
Morgana, or she was almost the Morgan Le Fay of East of Eden, because it's like, of the women, she's the most active female character, and she's like Satan. But at the same time, it's like,
Yeah, but yeah, she was a trip. But don't necessarily know if I have much more to say on her besides that. But like, she at least knew what she knew what she was going for, and she was like, "I'm gonna shoot you if you get in my way."
Yeah.
But
I mean, there were, she is something. This, so, I read something online, and I wish that I would have written it down so that I would have a source to refer people to. But I saw online somewhere that one of John Steinbeck's wives had written a memoir of some kind, like a telling of her life with John Steinbeck. And the person who like helped pull it all together, who I think was a man, said something along the lines of John Steinbeck having written that it almost looked like he wrote Kathy as one of his ex-wives. And I was like, of course you did, you prick. Like, why?
Oh, I did not know that. I will have to look into that. But
and she was his way with words is very nice.
mm-hmm.
And the way that he described her, the way that he showed us her life unfolding, it was all very believable that she was this crazy person who was just, you couldn't have any empathy for her at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not really.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear from someone who does have empathy with her. I'm not like, I would be curious to hear that person's thoughts.
Yeah, that would be very interesting.
The fact that she told Adam to throw the boys down a well or something, or did she tell Samuel? I don't remember. She shot Adam. She might as well have had her kids thrown down a well, according to her, and then went to murder someone so that she could inherit a whorehouse. It's like, man.
So she could continue to like hold people's faults against them, and like, because she had all those blackmail files and everything, so she could be like, I'm going to continue to lord this power over you,
yeah,
or over everybody, so that way she could feel secure and have control. Which,
so maybe you caught it since this is your fourth read through, but they get to the end and they're destroying all this evidence after Kathy has committed suicide, and there's someone who, I can't remember if he thanks the sheriff or if it's the sheriff thanking someone else for destroying this evidence that Kathy had against them. And I could not figure out like who was who, what was what in that moment. And I was like, well, who was being blackmailed?
I think it was evidence against, like, yeah, first of all, I think it was one of the sheriffs that like the evidence was against, and that's why they were like just destroying, or it was someone that worked in the sheriff's office because they had found like a folder that of someone's. So I don't remember exactly who it was, but yeah. So
okay, all right, yeah, I didn't quite catch that.
To
anyway,
move
yeah,
off of
says that there is to say Kathy about Kathy.
Yeah, to move off of that, I think we should fully switch gears and talk about Samuel or Lee, or one of the nice, happy characters in this book. But yeah, so I liked the story of the Hamiltons getting to California, how they like came from Ireland and all of that. That was a good like immigration story, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked how we got to kind of see the children and Samuel like become Americanized. Like that was interesting. Liza was the only one who was very much like, I will not change. I believe these things. I am going to be strong in those beliefs, and nothing will change.
One of my favorite lines from Liza is something along the lines of, "Would I send you to the good Lord God with whiskey on your breath? No, I wouldn't." Samuel says, "All right." Rolls over.
All right.
You guys are precious.
Yes, I think the Hamiltons obviously are the like sane people who work hard, who don't have a lot. Like we get to just see like semi-normal people throughout the story, because the Trasks and Kathy are not normal. Like they are crazy, all of them. But and I think that obviously Samuel's role in like making sure the twins stayed alive and kind of like getting Adam back on his feet, and also like making him like think with his brain was like really important. So
yeah, I applaud Samuel for his, you know, willingness to do that. You know, there's not there looking beyond the fact that we're in the early 19th century and that just generally things are harder, and I imagine that there was a lot of, you know, you take care of yours and I'll take care of mine, especially out where resources are scarce. So for Samuel to go and just pick Adam up and essentially smack him in the face and be like, you have to raise these kids, I'm leaving. Like, oh man, you're great. You're like the hero. Like, he is the quintessential hero of the story.
Yeah, I really liked, I think it was at the end of part 2, the whole like scene with the naming. I found it was tabbed. So like the whole scene with him and Lee and the naming was great. And then obviously the whole like Valmaist essay is my favorite because I want to get Tim Schul tattooed on my body, but that's a different issue. We'll get to that one here in a minute. But yeah, I think Samuel actually punched Adam at one point.
Did he punch him? I remember him being like, I didn't like it. I've never hit a man or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if that was with the naming and like taking care of the kids, but he did punch him at one point, and he had never hit a man before, and it wasn't in his nature. He was like, "Oh no," but like, you gotta wake up, bro.
Yeah, I thought that was great. I was like, yes, that's exactly what Adam needed, because, you know, he's simpering over a woman who literally shot him, and he's like,
Kathy knew her power over him for sure. So, but yeah, Samuel was good, and I liked that we kind of got a wide angle picture of his life, but I did think it was encouraging that like he never gave up on like trying to come up with solutions, even though they like had no money or food, which was like good on you for being smart. Maybe like there's more important things in certain situations, but like you also never gave up. And then how we got to see him interact with his kids, and then like ultimately his death and his family, and the whole town's reaction to it was like yes, you deserve all of this, like all of the love, because you were an awesome character.
Yeah, and I thought it was one of the moments in the book that really pulled at my heartstrings was when Samuel realizes that I think the implication was that he was developing dementia or something. Like he wasn't able to really keep things in his mind, I guess. But whenever he realizes that, and he walks into the kitchen, and Liza's, you know, working at the kitchen like she always does, and he comes in and sits down and says something along the lines of like, look at you, 3 little bites of wife. And it was like something that he used to say to her when they were younger. Because their marriage is depicted very much as Liza is she's strict, she's not putting up with any crap, you will be a good Christian, so help her God. And Samuel's very much, he's a lot more grounded than Liza is. And so a lot of it was portrayed as Samuel was kind of whipped, you know. and to see them in that moment talking back and forth with one another, planning to see out the rest of their years together, it was like, oh, you two are so sweet. Like they're just such a precious little couple. I loved them together.
They were great. Liza doesn't have like that much page time, but I liked her like taking care of the twins, and honestly, when she was like telling the parrot that they got from like a pirate or something that was cursing, to like, watch your language, sir. Yeah. I'm like, and apparently when she like at one point, like in the middle, when they were like talking about like shipping the parents off to the kids to rotate until like they basically died. They only made it as far as Ollie's house, R.I.P. Samuel. But but like they're like, well, yeah, she never drank anything in her life, and then she got a little sick, and the doctor recommended some like brandy or something to help her sleep, and then she ended up like going to God with a little brandy on her lips, so to
Yes,
speak.
yes,
I'm like,
yes.
oh.
I like how they point out that Liza dies with a smile on her face, and it's like the point that she's been trying to get to her entire life anyway. This is the part where she's happy to get there because she's going to heaven as far as she's concerned.
Yes.
So that was all very sweet. It made their children's, the ones who died so tragically, even all the more tragic.
Tell me about Lee, because you said you loved him, and I'll let you talk for a minute because I've been like monologuing over here.
I love Lee because he comes into it as like, I'm just figuring out how to get by and I'm gonna go do my thing, and then he ends up with he kind of ends up owning the found family trope in a way, and watching him grow and tend to the boys was very heartwarming. Just how much he decided that he was going to stick around for the Trask. And then
I like that.
Even when he decided to go, he was like, I don't want to.
Nope.
Turns out I don't want to. Turns out I'm just going to sit here and keep making your Thanksgiving dinners and your cherry pies and your,
tarts.
Being the housekeeper, essentially.
Yeah, he was like, I was never so homesick. And then Adam was like, thank you for coming back. Turns out I'm bad at cooking. And also, like, we love you, Lee. So.
Right. I liked that part. Adam was like, I can't cook. And
I like
the fact that he had such a unique relationship with Caleb, because he could see that Caleb needed someone. And then his relationship with who's the girl?
Abra.
Yeah, Abra. The relationship that they built together was it made my heart happy.
Yes. I like that. So the Lee is on like one of the best characters obviously in this book, and I like that he was aware enough to be like, yeah, this is what people expect of me, so I'm gonna talk the mean copy. I don't know how to pronounce it, but like the broken Chinese English speaking thing. He's like, this is what people expect, so this is what I'm gonna do. But then he's actually like a very intelligent character, a very well-rounded character, who just wants to like hang out with his books. Like it's but then he ends up.
We got to see him come around to being. We did get to see him come around to be comfortable with being an Asian American. He learned to respect himself, in that, he didn't. There was a long time, like, part of his arc is that he's split between the fact that he was born and raised in America, but his parents were, first generation immigrants, and so he's kind of torn between these two sides of himself, and by the end he's intermeshed them very well and is very comfortable in his own skin, and it's like, yay!
It's like, yay, way to go. I like that a lot. And then I think you describing it as found family, and like that is what this is. He's like, these people need me. Honestly, like I imagine it was a good job kind of thing. Like he was paid well and things like that. And then he's like, yeah, no, this is where I belong. This is actually home for me, turns out. I don't actually need to go like live in the Chinatown part and have my bookshop or anything like that. But so yeah, and I like that he also, like, when we get to the like Tim Shell part, that's a conversation between him and Adam and Samuel, and I like that he was like, well, I was talking to these people in the church, and basically like the translations are jank, so we were trying to figure out like what the actual meaning was, because they were different in these different translations of the Bible. But it's like, it's not actually the like, you will conquer sin, or you can conquer sin. It's like
Thou mayest.
Thou mayest, like you, or sorry, it's you will, or I'm trying to do.
Use those
I
tabs.
there's 2 tabs on this one page for difference. Yeah, there is so there's the thou shalt, which is the like you will, no matter what. That is the thing. And then I don't know what the other one was. Like I guess I didn't underline it correctly, but oh yeah, here we go. The American Standard Translation orders men. The King James translation makes that promise that thou shalt, but the actual Hebrew word, the word timshel, thou mayest, that gives a choice. It might be the most important word in the world. It says the way is open. That throws it right back on a man. For if thou mayest, and it is also true that thou mayest not. So I like that the whole point of this book is basically, and we see it later with cows, like you have the good and the bad inside of you. You have your crazy psychotic mother, Kathy, and then you have, I don't know if he was like the Adam or Charles version. I think he was more the Charles.
Yeah,
like,
Caleb
and you also
was implied to be Charles's child.
yeah, honestly, I thought they were both implied to be Charles's child, so I didn't realize they were. And anywho, but I was like, you have your mother and you have your father, and you have like this whole world around you. You don't have to be like, it's not predestined. You have a choice on who you want to be and be better or be worse, but it's like, it's up to you. There's not an excuse. If you don't do anything about what's happening, then that is your choice to be lazy. So I think that's obviously, I think, the message of the entire book, which is why Tim Scholl is also the very last word in the book. But yeah, honestly, like that whole like monologue, which I believe is in case anybody wants to find it, it's page 301 in this particular edition. But it's in the like smack middle of the book.
Yeah.
Because I always try and go reference it to tell people, and I'm like, I can never find it. So so now y'all know. I will also tell you what chapter it's in. Chapter 24. I think that's like, it's all getting up to this point where then they realize that they have the choice to be who they want to be in life, and it's like what they do with it afterwards. So the buildup of all the insanity, and then like, okay, you know that this is a thing now. Where are we going in the future? So
Right. Yeah. I thought it was very sweet to see how much Lee tried to get that through Caleb's head, because you know, Aaron just sort of had an easier time of everything. That was sort of his theme as a person, and you know, Caleb was sort of this underdog. He kind of couldn't ever get the attention he felt like he wanted or needed or deserved. And you know, Lee was always telling him, like, you know, it's always your choice, it's no one's making you do it, it's, you know, you have both, you can do both things, you can, you know, you can be whoever you want to be. It's not. And I think this was a conversation they were having right after Lee finds out that Caleb knows who his mom is. And then Lee is like, you know, you don't have to be like her, you can be however you want to be. And then the fact that everyone was sheltering Aaron from it the whole time was something else that, you know, whenever that was sort of the linchpin for his arc, it was like, why didn't you guys just say something before now?
Yeah, I don't think that Aaron would have reacted had he that way if he was just told by his father what was actually going on. But I think with you saying that Aaron had it easier just in life kind of thing, like he was just, everyone liked him off the bat. It also made him a weaker person, and that's why that broke him. And also why college broke him, because that was happening before he was broken by discovering who his mother was. But I did like, I guess we're kind of talking about the twins now. Caleb was definitely rougher around the edges, more matched up with both Kathy and Charles's like perspectives, or like behavioral patterns, I guess, and mild insanity. But like, bless Lee for shoving it through his brain. And in terms of like Cal ending up with Abra, I liked the line that Lee was like, "Well, now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good."
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah.
because that was, she was having to be perfect for Aaron, and then which wouldn't have worked out in the end had he lived. Like, there would have been other issues to fry, or fish to fry, so to speak.
Yeah, that whole Abra and Aaron thing was
weird from the whole beginning.
You could see it at the beginning. You were like, oh no, this is never going to work, because he has these two relationships directly intersecting one another, or directly on top of one another, overlaying one another, instead of a healthier idea of what it would be to have a relationship with a mother versus a relationship with a significant other. Yeah, right there from the start. And then
I was like, oh honey.
yes. And then Abra was like kind of feeding into it, but then I think later in her story she's kind of like, oh, I was feeding into that, and I was kind of helping him keep the theatrical walls up, this fantasy that he lives in where nothing is actually the way that it is. College wasn't the way that it was. She wasn't the way that he thought she was. His mom and dad were not what he thought they were. He was real confused all the time.
Yeah, he was not in a good way, so to speak. So
yeah. I thought it interesting that he and Lee didn't have more of a relationship.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem with, like, that's why he didn't make it in life. Because, not like saying that Lee needed to like be able to help him or anything, but like Lee was able to so aggressively like influence and kind of encourage Caleb that we saw, and Aaron just like, because he didn't think he needed anybody else, he was the only one at fault, like when, or he was the only one he had to lean on when he like found out what was going on, and when like his world like fell apart around him, basically, because he's like, I can't trust my father, or, and like, also Caleb was mean when he told him like the way he did, like that was unnecessary, but like Adam was like mean to Caleb too, and that was all Caleb wanted, was to like help him like get his money back. So it's like he was the only like domino holding himself up, and then when his whole like perspective on the world fell apart, he did too.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Whenever it got to a place where the curtain came down, it was like, oh, now I can't cope. And you're right. He was one of those kids that everybody thought would just do fine and be really fine, and so he didn't actually have a lot of external support, because he believed that too. Yeah, that's very good analysis of Aaron, for sure.
Yeah. So we can obviously, I think there's definitely more characters to talk about, but I think that's like the gist of everything that happened in the book. Yeah, I do love this book. It's beautifully written. And it is a very like, I like how the structure of the story is, where we get to see all of the people, the main characters, then we get to kind of see their children, and then their children even further. So it's a journey of family and like hardship and all of that. I will say, I have a question. As far as I'm aware, you're not a churchgoer and whatnot. Did that affect how some of the like biblical analogies like read off to you, or did you think that they still like made the story go forward?
I mean, I think it made the story go forward because the characters themselves were Christians. So within their perspective, I could see, what they were drawing from. And yeah, I'm not a churchgoer, I'm not a Christian, but I'm not someone who that necessarily has to interfere with the story. You know, it can if it comes across preachy, but it wasn't preachy, you know, at the reader at all. It was all very much in the context of, and then even in that scene with Lee and Samuel and Adam, you see how Steinbeck actually leans really heavily into the fact that the Bible's been up for interpretation for so long. That's why.
Yeah, I like that. Obviously, there's biblical analogies in a lot of stories, but I did like that this one was like, we're gonna like study it and interpret it how, like, and they do basically like almost a root cause analysis on like the thou mayest experience. Like they're not just taking something at face value, which I liked in this book. So I thought that was for me very well done. So I was just, if you had an interesting perspective on that, I was gonna just, it would be good for discussion. So
I mean, the only input that I have on it really is just that it's I can see how, again, it would be sort of a way to show time frame, but also, I mean, I guess it was expected. You know, like classic white literature, it's gonna have Christian backgrounds more than likely, and you know, if it didn't, then it was probably burned in a book pile somewhere.
Oh man.
But yeah, I thought it was sweet. I thought it was interesting how they kept evolving their faith instead of losing it. They continue to try to interpret and try to understand and try to almost look at it from a scholarly perspective. And then I did
like
think
that.
it was interesting that we didn't get a lot of that from Aaron, even though he was someone who was like straight going to church all the time.
He was going into ministry.
Right, but he never joined the religious discussion. I thought that was weird. As soon as they brought up that he was going to be doing that kind of stuff, I was like, oh, he's going to get into a conversation with Adam and Lee, and then he's going to learn about Samuel. No. He just goes to college, gets jaded, and joins the army. It's like, oh, okay, great.
Okay. You did not have the critical thinking skills, young Aaron.
Right.
So I will say, based off of our experience now reading the King Arthur tales of his noble knights and this, are you liking Steinbeck more that you've seen his like quintessential work, or what is your overall perspective on Steinbeck so far?
Well, so there was not as much difference between the sexism and racism between the two books that I really wanted to see. It was like, oh, it's all still very okay. It's all still very classic white male. Got it.
I mean, Senor Steinbeck, I think, died before civil rights, so it doesn't excuse things, but it can lend to explanation.
Right. Yeah. No, I get that. I just feel like that's something that was very much at the forefront of my mind going into all of it. Was like, oh, okay, this is definitely one of the products of the times, you know, books.
Yeah.
But as far as structure goes, it was interesting to see his structuring of East of Eden. And I'll be curious to see his structuring in other works of his as well. I don't remember too much Of Mice and Men, or how I was not reading as critically then as I would now. So I can't really break that one down. But I do enjoy his story structure. There's something about the way that he introduces characters, the way that he brings things full circle, the way that he foreshadows, and the way that he gives you that payoff at the end that is very satisfying. And that was a big difference from the King Arthur thing. That was like a translation. So yeah, of course, but I was relieved for that, because I was like, I'm not going to be able to deal with this if it's another like episodic freaking
translation,
nonsense with knights and rape and I just can't.
Yeah, this is a reading journey for sure. But yeah, I think that his books, obviously not the King Arthur one because that was a special case, but his books do have the like sense of older classic literature where they'll like spend a little bit explaining something just for context, which I honestly enjoy as a reader. Like Les Mis or whatever didn't bother me. Even, I mean, Victor Hugo went a little far into the Paris sewers for like 100 pages. Like Steinbeck's not that bad, but like it's kind of the same like old school writing style where you get like a description of something for a chapter or two, and then you'll like return to the story. But I agree with like the way he introduces characters is I think it's awesome. Like I wish more books like did that were like we're gonna give you the background of the insane person in this book for like 25 pages. Are you ready?
Right. Yeah. And like while it was frustrating to me, the beginning part where they're laying on the groundwork and everything, I think a lot of that was because of the fact I don't really read a lot of like contemporary, so maybe contemporary kind of lays the groundwork in similar ways. But it could also be like that classic book type vibe that you're talking about. But as much as that frustrated me with everything at the end, it was like, oh, okay, I see why we had to know all of that now. Yeah. So I almost feel like classics in that way, the classic classic white literature has a sort of learning curve the same way that fantasy does, where the author has to say, okay, it's 1860, we're at war with the Native Americans, and this is how this kid's growing up, and also this psycho chick, this is the kind of stuff she used to do, also she killed her parents. Like
it's still world building, it's just less magical.
right it's less getting to know the magic system and more getting to know the psychology behind each character in depth, so that you can make implications and connections with them throughout. But
so we are reading Grapes of Wrath next still.
That's and then did we decide to do that for June, July? Are we doing that over 2 months?
Yeah, June, July. It's not quite as chunky as this guy, but he's still pretty chunky. And you'll notice because I had started rereading Grapes of Wrath before we started this one, so I paused that. So I'm like already halfway done, so I might finish that one on time. Turns out. But that one has you're basically following the people from Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl, and they are also journeying to California because John Steinbeck has a theme. But the Okies, as they were called, they don't speak in normal English, so that might be an adjustment period. So we get some broken speech patterns for uneducated folk of Oklahoma.
Okay, so it's more like a rural type dialect then that we're working with. Okay, all right.
Yeah, this is a more elevated conversation book, but.
My understanding it too is that the discussion behind Grapes of Wrath is supposed to be like directed toward how immigrants were employed in fields or something like am I misremembering that?
No, it's basically, so it's following the people from Oklahoma primarily, but it is still like a migrant work thing in the fields of California. Like they were farmers and they all lost their farms because of the Dust Bowl. So, but it was like they go to California, and there's also a lot of migrant workers there from places like Mexico and Central America. So it's like it's a blending of everybody's culture and what they've gone through and how they like had to travel and like almost die on the way here kind of thing. So I don't remember
style storytelling.
I have died of dysentery on the
dysentery, yes.
No, so
I redid a thing on that. You need to look into that. I'm not going to get into it. You get distracted. Look into the remake.
I will have to do that. No, yeah. So I haven't quite made it very far in Grapes of Wrath yet, but so they're still on their trek where I'm at in the book. Okay. But so I don't really remember how much happens once they get to California, or if it's entirely about the journey. So we'll find out when we get there. But
yeah, all right, cool, yay! This was fun.
You want to hold up your book and smile for an extended second so we can get a lovely screen cap for YouTube?
Let's see. We'll do it this way.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I'm going to stop this recording right now.